The weight of the mop handle felt cold against my palm as 85 people stared at me. My son's new wife, Madison, stood there with that practiced smile, her manicured hand still extended like she'd just done me a favor. "Since you're here," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "make yourself useful." The laughter rippled through the crowd, champagne flutes pausing mid-sip as everyone waited to see what the black woman in the corner would do. What Madison didn't know, what none of them knew, was that 5 days earlier, I'd signed papers that made me the majority shareholder of her father's company, the same company currently writing checks for this $3 million house. Before I tell you what happened next, tell me where you're watching from. Have you ever been in a moment where someone completely underestimated you? Drop a comment, because I need to know I'm not alone in this. But let me back up. Let me tell you how I ended up standing in my son's new house, being handed cleaning supplies like I was the help. 6 months earlier, I sat across from Marcus at our favorite brunch spot, the one with the floor-to-ceiling windows that caught the morning light just right. My son looked happy, genuinely happy, in a way I hadn't seen since he was a child discovering something new. "Mom," he said, his eyes bright, "I met someone." The way he said it, I knew this was different. 28 years old, my baby boy, and he'd dated plenty, but this tone in his voice was new. "Tell me about her," I said, watching the sun catch the edge of my coffee cup, the steam rising in lazy spirals. "Her name's Madison. She's brilliant, Mom. She works in her father's company, marketing director. And she gets me, you know? We can talk for hours." He pulled out his phone, showed me pictures. Blonde hair, perfect teeth, that kind of polished beauty that comes from a lifetime of country clubs and private schools. Something in my chest tightened, but I pushed it down. My son was happy. That's what mattered. "When do I get to meet her?" I asked, keeping my voice light. Marcus hesitated, just for a second, but I caught it. "Soon, Mom, I promise. She's just really busy with work right now. Big campaign launching." 3 months went by. 3 months of Marcus making excuses, work trips, family obligations on her side, her cousin's wedding, her aunt's surgery, always something. I watched my braids in the bathroom mirror one morning, twisting them into my usual updo, and wondered why my son's girlfriend was avoiding meeting his mother. Then came the engagement announcement, via text. A photo of Madison's hand, massive diamond catching the light, and the words, "She said yes." I called immediately. "Marcus, baby, congratulations, this is wonderful news." "Thanks, Mom." His voice sounded off, distant. "So when can I meet my future daughter-in-law? We should celebrate, the 3 of us." Another pause. "Actually, Mom, Madison's planning the engagement party. It's going to be really formal, kind of a society thing. Her father's inviting business associates. I'll make sure you get an invitation." An invitation. To my own son's engagement party. The cream-colored card arrived 2 weeks later. Formal script, my name spelled wrong. Ms. Diane Johnston, instead of Dr. Diane Johnson. I have a PhD in business strategy. Spent 15 years building my consulting firm from nothing. But to them, I was Ms., and they couldn't even get my last name right. The engagement party was held at the country club, the kind of place with more white columns than people of color. I spent 2 hours getting ready that evening, choosing a navy dress that was elegant but not too bold, making sure my makeup was perfect, my locks twisted into an intricate style that had taken my stylist 3 hours. I wanted to make a good impression. I should have known better. Madison greeted guests at the entrance, a vision in white cocktail dress, her father beside her. I watched her hug woman after woman, air kisses and squeals of delight. When I approached, Marcus at my side, her smile flickered. Just for a moment, but I saw it. "Madison," Marcus said, his voice tight. "This is my mother, Diane." "Oh," she said, her eyes traveling from my face down to my shoes and back up again. A assessment, cold and calculating. "How nice that you could make it. Not wonderful to meet you, or I've heard so much about you. Just how nice that you could make it. Like I was a distant acquaintance who'd RSVP'd out of obligation." Her father, Richard Sterling, shook my hand with the kind of grip that was technically polite, but communicated disinterest. "Pleasure," he muttered, already looking past me to the next guest. The entire evening, I was invisible. Madison's friends, her family, they all circulated around me like I was a piece of furniture. When I tried to join conversations, they would go quiet, offer tight smiles, then pick up again once I moved away. I caught fragments of their talk. Summer houses in the Hamptons, skiing in Aspen, whose daughter got into which Ivy League. I found Marcus in the corner, his jaw tight. "You okay, baby?" "I'm fine, Mom." But he wasn't looking at me. He was watching Madison hold court across the room, and something in his eyes looked trapped. The wedding came 3 months later. Small ceremony, they said. Immediate family only. I wasn't asked to help plan. Wasn't consulted on any decisions. I received another formal invitation, this time with my name spelled correctly, and showed up to a garden ceremony where I knew exactly 3 people. Marcus, his father who flew in from Atlanta, and Marcus's younger sister Jasmine. Jasmine sat beside me during the ceremony, her hand finding mine. "This is messed up, Mom," she whispered. "The way they're treating you." "Shh. It's Marcus's day. We're here to support him." But watching my son marry this woman, seeing how her family looked at him, at us, like we were decorative additions to their perfect white wedding, something inside me hardened. A cold clarity I hadn't felt before. The reception was worse. We were seated at a table in the back, near the kitchen doors. Not the family table, not even close to it. Madison's parents sat front and center, surrounded by their society friends. And when the speeches started, when Madison's father stood up to toast the couple, he talked about how Madison was marrying up and coming, how Marcus was making something of himself. Like my son, with his Harvard MBA and his position as senior analyst at one of the top firms in the city, was some kind of charity case they were elevating. I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. Little did I know that wedding reception would be the last time I'd feel powerless in Madison's presence. 2 weeks after the wedding, my phone rang. Richard Sterling's name appeared on the screen. I stared at it for 3 rings, confused. We'd barely exchanged 10 words total at both the engagement party and wedding. "Dr. Johnson," his voice came through, formal, strained. "I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time." "Mr. Sterling, this is unexpected." "Yes, well," he cleared his throat. "I find myself in need of consultation, discreet consultation. I've done some research, and your firm has an excellent reputation in corporate strategy and crisis management." I sat up straighter in my office chair. What kind of crisis are we talking about? What followed was a 2-hour conversation that revealed Sterling Industries was hemorrhaging money. Bad investments, mismanaged funds, a board of directors who were more interested in golf games than actual governance. Richard had inherited the company from his father, grown it through luck more than skill, and now the foundation was crumbling. "I need someone who can see what I'm missing," he said finally. "Someone who can be objective. Your credentials are impeccable." He had no idea I was Marcus's mother. In his world, I was so insignificant that my face at his daughter's wedding hadn't even registered. I was just another black woman in the background. Forgettable. "I'd need full access to your books," I said calmly. "Complete transparency." "Of course, whatever you need. Subscribe before I reveal what I discovered in those books, because what I found changed everything." I spent 3 weeks diving into Sterling Industries' financial records. What I found was worse than Richard had described. It wasn't just mismanagement. It was negligence bordering on fraud. Contracts signed without proper review. Investments in companies that existed only on paper. Money flowing out to consultants who never delivered results. But I also found something else. Opportunity. Sterling Industries had value. Real value. Under all the garbage, there were solid assets, good employees, contracts with major clients that could be leveraged. The company wasn't dying. It was being killed by incompetence. I prepared 2 presentations. The first was for Richard, a comprehensive analysis of how to stop the bleeding, restructure, and stabilize. The second presentation I kept to myself. "This is remarkable work," Richard said when I presented my findings. We sat in his corner office, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. "You've identified problems my own CFO missed." "Your CFO is part of the problem," I said simply. "He's been approving expenditures that make no business sense. Either he's incompetent or complicit." Richard's face went pale. "What are you suggesting?" I'm suggesting you need to clean house, starting at the top. Over the next month, I became Richard's most trusted advisor. He didn't know about my connection to Marcus. My son had taken Madison's last name in a hyphenated form, Marcus Johnson Sterling, but I'd remained simply Dr. Diane Johnson professionally. Different last names, and Richard was too self-absorbed to make the connection. I watched him follow my recommendations, firing the CFO, restructuring the board, bringing in new management. The company began to stabilize, then grow, and Richard, grateful and desperate, offered me something I hadn't expected. "I want you on the board," he said. "More than that. I want to sell you shares, significant shares. You've saved this company, Diane. I trust you." I met with my financial advisors that night, looked at the numbers. Sterling Industries was undervalued, recovering, positioned for major growth. It was a risk, but a calculated one. "How much is he offering?" my advisor asked. "Enough to make me majority shareholder if I want it." The silence on the other end of the phone was long. "That's a lot of capital, Diane." "I know." I looked at my reflection in my office window. Dark skin, locks falling over my shoulder, the city lights behind me. I thought about Madison's face at that wedding reception. The way she'd looked at my son like he was lucky to have her. The way her family had looked at me like I was nothing. "Do it," I said. "All of it. I want controlling interest." 5 days before Marcus and Madison's housewarming party, I signed the papers. 51% of Sterling Industries now belonged to me. Richard kept 30%, and the remaining 19% was distributed among smaller investors. I was now, effectively, Richard Sterling's boss. I didn't tell Marcus. I should have, but something stopped me. Maybe I wanted to see how the housewarming would go. Maybe some part of me already knew. The invitation had arrived 3 weeks prior. Another formal card, another Ms. Diane Johnston. They still couldn't get my name right. I bought a gift, a set of crystal wine glasses, expensive and tasteful. I dressed carefully for the party. A simple black dress, elegant but understated, pearl earrings, my locks in a twisted updo. I looked at myself in the mirror and practiced my smile. This was my son's house, his new life. I would be gracious. The house was massive. 3 stories of glass and steel in a gated community, the kind of neighborhood where every lawn looked like a golf course. I parked my car, a modest sedan, between a Tesla and a Mercedes, and walked to the front door carrying my wrapped gift. That's when everything changed. I rang the doorbell, heard laughter and music from inside. The door opened, and there was Madison, champagne flute in hand, surrounded by a group of women in cocktail dresses. "Oh," she said, looking at me like I was a door-to-door salesperson. "You look lost. The maid's entrance is in the back." The world seemed to slow down. I saw her friends' faces, the way their smiles sharpened, heard the intake of breath that comes before laughter. Madison reached beside the door, grabbed a mop that had been leaning there, and held it out to me. "Since you're here anyway," she said, her voice carrying across the foyer where more guests were turning to look. "Make yourself useful. 85 people. I found out later there were exactly 85 guests at that party, and in that moment, it felt like all 85 of them were watching me. The black woman in the simple dress being handed a mop by the white woman in designer heels. If you're enjoying this, hit that like button right now, because what happened next was a long time coming. Some of them laughed. Not all, but enough. I heard it ripple through the crowd, saw phones coming out. Someone was going to record this. This was going to be Madison's funny story, the time she mistook her mother-in-law for the cleaning lady. Except it wasn't a mistake. I could see it in her eyes. She knew exactly who I was. I took the mop. My dark fingers wrapped around the handle, and I felt that strange calm settle over me. The same calm I'd felt in boardrooms when men tried to talk over me. The same calm I'd felt every time someone underestimated me because of my skin color, my gender, my natural hair. "Madison," I said quietly, my voice steady. "Where's Marcus?" "Oh, Marcus is busy hosting actual guests," she said, taking a sip of her champagne. "Why don't you go ahead and start in the kitchen? The caterers made a bit of a mess." I looked past her, into the house my son supposedly owned. Saw the crowd of white faces, the few people of color scattered among them looking uncomfortable. Saw the crystal chandelier, the marble floors, the floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the manicured lawn. $3 million, I knew from the paperwork I'd seen. This house cost $3 million. And Sterling Industries had written the check for the down payment as a corporate investment property that Marcus and Madison would manage. I'd seen that expense approval cross my desk 2 days ago in my new capacity as majority shareholder. I'd approved it, curious to see what my new stepdaughter-in-law would do with company money. "I'll find Marcus myself," I said, handing the mop back to her. Her eyes narrowed. "Excuse me?" "The mop. You can keep it. I'm here as a guest." "A guest?" Her voice went sharp and I saw her father, Richard, turning from a conversation across the room. He hadn't seen me yet. "You weren't on the guest list." I pulled the invitation from my purse, still perfectly pristine, cream-colored cardstock with my misspelled name. "I have an invitation." Madison snatched it from my hand, looked at it, and her face went red. "This is a mistake. Marcus must have sent this without telling me. This party is for our professional contacts, our friends. It's not—" She didn't finish the sentence, didn't have to. "It's not for people like you." Marcus appeared then, pushing through the crowd. I saw his face, saw the horror dawning. "Mom? What's going on?" "Your wife was just explaining the guest list," I said calmly. "Madison?" Marcus looked at her, and something in his voice broke my heart. This wasn't surprise in his tone. This was resignation, like he'd been expecting something like this. "Marcus, honey," Madison's voice shifted, went sugary sweet. "There's been a misunderstanding. Your mother thought this was a casual family thing, but you know this is a business event. I'm sure she understands." "You handed her a mop," Marcus said flatly. "I thought—" Madison laughed, but it sounded forced now. "It was just a joke, baby. She was standing there looking confused, and I thought it would be funny." "Funny?" Marcus's voice was ice. "You thought it would be funny to humiliate my mother in front of 85 people." The crowd had gone quiet now. All conversation stopped. I could feel every eye on us. Richard finally made his way over, and I watched his face carefully. Watched the moment he recognized me, saw his eyes go wide, saw him glance at Madison, then at me, then at Marcus. "Dr. Johnson," he said weakly. "I didn't realize you'd be here." Madison's head snapped toward her father. "You know her." "Know her?" Richard's voice cracked slightly. "Madison, this is Dr. Diane Johnson, the consultant I've been working with, the one who saved the company." I watched Madison's face, watched the gears turning. She still didn't get it. "Okay," she said slowly. "So you've done some work for Daddy's company. That doesn't mean you can just show up at a private event." "Madison." Richard's voice was sharp now. "Dr. Johnson isn't just a consultant. As of 5 days ago, she's the majority shareholder of Sterling Industries." The silence that followed was beautiful, absolute and complete. "Would you do what I did next? Comment below before I tell you what happened, because I want to know if you think I went too far or not far enough." Madison's champagne flute slipped from her fingers. The crystal shattered on the marble floor, golden liquid spreading across the white stone like a stain. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. "That's impossible." "It's very possible," I said quietly. "Your father offered me the shares. I accepted. As of last Tuesday, I own 51% of Sterling Industries. Your father owns 30%. The rest is distributed among smaller investors." I watched her process this, watched her look at the house around her, the expensive furniture, the catered food, the bartender in the corner pouring top-shelf liquor. All of it paid for by a company I now controlled. "But you can't," she started, then stopped. "Daddy?" Richard wouldn't meet her eyes. "It was the right business decision, sweetheart. The company would have gone under without Dr. Johnson's intervention." "So you sold it to her?" Madison's voice went shrill. "To Marcus's mother? Without telling me?" "I didn't know she was Marcus's mother until about 30 seconds ago," Richard said, and I could hear the fear creeping into his voice. Fear of what I might do now. Fear of what this meant for his precious daughter's lifestyle. Marcus was staring at me. "Mom, is this true?" "Yes, baby. Your father-in-law hired me 6 months ago to save his company. I did, and when he offered me the opportunity to invest, I took it. I kept my voice gentle, focused on my son. I was going to tell you this weekend. I wanted to wait until after the housewarming." "Why?" Marcus asked. I looked at Madison. "I wanted to see what kind of woman my son married. I wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt. Madison's face had gone from red to pale. You set me up. This whole thing was a trap. No, I said simply. I gave you an opportunity to be kind, to be decent. You chose to hand me a mop instead. The crowd was riveting. I could see phones out now, recording every word. This would be all over social media within the hour. Madison's humiliation broadcast to everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, raising my voice slightly, addressing the room. I apologize for the disruption. I'm Dr. Diane Johnson, Marcus's mother and the majority shareholder of Sterling Industries. I was invited to this lovely housewarming party, though my daughter-in-law seems to have forgotten that detail. I turned back to Madison. About this house, the one your father's company purchased as a corporate investment property. I'll need to review that expense. $3 million is quite a lot for what was described in the paperwork as a managed corporate asset. I'm sure you and Marcus have been keeping excellent records of how this property benefits the company. Madison's eyes went wide. She understood now. Understood that every dollar of her lifestyle, from this house to her car to her shopping trips, all of it flowed from a company I now controlled. You wouldn't, she whispered. Wouldn't what? I asked pleasantly. Wouldn't do my fiduciary duty as majority shareholder? Wouldn't examine questionable expenses? Wouldn't make decisions in the best interest of the company and its investors? I smiled at her. The same calm smile I'd given her when she handed me the mop. Or did you mean I wouldn't hold you accountable for your actions? Because, sweetheart, accountability is exactly what I specialize in. Marcus stepped between us. Mom, can we talk? Privately? Of course, baby. We moved into a side room, what looked like a home office. Marcus closed the door, and I saw the conflict warring on his face. Why didn't you tell me, he asked, about the company, about working with Richard, all of it? Would it have changed anything? I asked gently. Would you have married her anyway? He sank into the desk chair. I don't know. Maybe. Probably. He looked up at me. I love her, Mom. I know you do, baby. But she's... He stopped, his hands running through his hair. The way she treats you. The way her family treats both of us. I kept thinking it would get better after the wedding. That once we were married, they'd accept me more. Accept you more. Marcus. I knelt beside his chair. People who respect you don't make you earn it. They just give it. What are you going to do? His voice was small, scared. My grown son reduced to the little boy who used to ask me to check for monsters under his bed. I'm going to go back out there, I said. I'm going to be gracious and polite. I'm going to let Madison save whatever face she can. But Marcus, I need you to understand something. That house you're living in, that car she drives, the lifestyle she's been maintaining, all of it comes from Sterling Industries. And Sterling Industries is no longer a Sterling family piggy bank. You're going to take it away. Not a question. A statement. I'm going to run it like a proper business. No more corporate gifts disguised as investments. No more nepotism. No more treating company assets like personal property. I stood up. If Madison has a problem with that, she can take it up with me in the boardroom. We went back out into the party. The crowd parted for us like water, everyone staring, whispering. Madison stood exactly where we'd left her, her father beside her, both of them looking shell-shocked. Marcus, darling. Madison's voice was different now, smaller, pleading. Tell your mother this is all a misunderstanding. Tell her I didn't mean anything by the mop thing. It was just a joke. Was it? Marcus asked quietly. Of course. I would never... She reached for him, but he stepped back. Don't, he said. Just don't, Madison. I watched my daughter-in-law's world crumble in real time. Watched her realize that her power, her position, her entire identity was built on sand. And the tide had just come in. If you've ever been underestimated because of how you look, hit that like button right now. And stay with me, because the consequences of that night were just beginning. The party ended early. Guests made excuses, filtered out in uncomfortable silence. I stayed until the end, helped Marcus clean up despite Madison's protests. Watched her sit on her expensive couch, still in her designer dress, staring at nothing. Richard tried to talk to me before he left. Dr. Johnson, I hope this won't affect our professional relationship. It won't, I said calmly. As long as you remember it's a professional relationship, No more favors for family, no more corporate funds for personal expenses. Sterling Industries operates by the books from now on. My books. He nodded, defeated, and left. Marcus walked me to my car. What happens now? He asked. Now you decide what kind of man you want to be, I said, and what kind of marriage you want to have. I drove home that night with the windows down, letting the cool air wash over me. My phone was already blowing up. Texts from Jasmine. OMG Mom, the videos are everywhere. Messages from friends who'd seen the clips circulating online. Madison's humiliation was going viral, and while part of me felt the sweet satisfaction of vindication, another part just felt tired. The next morning, I had a board meeting scheduled. First official meeting as majority shareholder. Richard was there, looking like he hadn't slept. The other board members were a mix of curious and concerned. First order of business, I said, taking my seat at the head of the table. We need to discuss Sterling Industries' policy on corporate asset usage and family member employment. I saw Richard flinch. Over the next 2 hours, I methodically dismantled every sweetheart deal, every questionable expense, every piece of nepotism that had been bleeding the company dry. Madison's marketing director position? Eliminated. The department was outsourced to an actual marketing firm for half the cost and twice the results. The corporate house, listed for sale. The corporate car she drove, repossessed. Dr. Johnson, one of the older board members, said, his voice careful. These are significant changes. Perhaps we should phase them in slowly. Why? I asked simply. So people have time to hide more waste? So we can continue operating inefficiently out of politeness? This company was dying because people were too afraid to make hard decisions. I'm not afraid. The vote was unanimous. Every measure passed. I didn't hear from Marcus for 3 days. When he finally called, his voice was strained. Mom, can we meet for lunch? We met at the same brunch place where he'd told me about Madison 6 months earlier. Full circle. He looked exhausted, his eyes shadowed. Madison's moving back in with her parents, he said without preamble. Temporarily, she says, until we figure things out. I'm sorry, baby. Are you? He looked at me, and there was no accusation in his voice, just genuine curiosity. I'm sorry you're hurting. I'm not sorry I protected my interests and the company's interests. Those are two different things. He nodded slowly. She wants me to ask you to give her job back. No. I told her you'd say that. He picked at his food. She's furious. Says you're vindictive, that you planned this whole thing to destroy her. Marcus, I plan to invest in a struggling company. I plan to make sound business decisions. What I didn't plan was for your wife to hand me a mop in front of 85 people. She says you provoked her by showing up. I was invited. She says the invitation was a mistake. Marcus, I reached across the table, took his hand. Listen to yourself. You're making excuses for someone who publicly humiliated your mother. Someone who has treated you like a trophy husband since day one. Someone whose love seems very conditional on access to her father's money. He pulled his hand away. That's not fair, isn't it? When's the last time she supported your career? When's the last time she asked about your goals, your dreams? Everything has been about her lifestyle, her social circle, her needs. He was quiet for a long time. I know, he finally whispered. I know, Mom. I've known for a while. But I thought if I just loved her enough, worked hard enough, proved myself enough. Baby, you can't love someone into respecting you. 3 weeks later, Madison filed for divorce. She wanted the house, wanted alimony, wanted Marcus to pay for the lifestyle she'd become accustomed to. Her lawyer tried to argue that Sterling Industries' assets were marital property since they'd been acquired during the marriage. My lawyer shut that down in about 15 minutes. The company shares were mine, purchased with my capital, in my name. Marcus had no claim to them, which meant Madison definitely didn't. The house sold for $2.8 million. Sterling Industries recouped most of its investment. Madison got whatever she'd contributed to the down payment, which turned out to be exactly $0. Her father had paid for everything. Richard tried to fight me on some of the corporate restructuring, tried to use his 30% stake to block measures. But 51% beats 30% every time. After the fourth failed vote, he stopped showing up to meetings, sent a proxy instead. I heard through the grapevine that he was telling people I'd stolen his company, that I'd manipulated him, that if he'd known who I was, he never would have trusted me. Maybe that's true. Maybe if he'd seen me as Marcus's mother first, as a black woman with personal connections, he never would have hired me. Maybe I only got the opportunity because I was invisible to him, just another professional consultant without a face or a history. But I did the work. I saved his company. And when he offered me the shares, I took them. That's not theft. That's business. Marcus struggled for months. I watched my son try to rebuild his life, piece by piece. He moved into a modest apartment, threw himself into his career. We had dinner once a week. And slowly, I watched him come back to himself, the version of Marcus who existed before Madison, before the pressure to be someone he wasn't. I think I was trying to prove something, he told me one night over Thai food. Dating Madison, marrying into her world. I thought it meant I'd made it, you know? Like I'd succeeded so much that I could belong anywhere, even in spaces that weren't built for people like us. You already succeeded, baby. You didn't need her world to validate that. I know that now. He smiled, and it was the first genuine smile I'd seen from him in months. I'm sorry, Mom, for not standing up for you sooner, for letting her treat you that way. You were in love. Love makes us do foolish things sometimes. Yeah, well, I'm done being foolish. Sterling Industries thrived under my leadership. Within 6 months, we'd cut the waste, streamlined operations, and increased profits by 40%. I brought in new talent, promoted from within based on merit, and created a corporate culture based on performance instead of pedigree. Richard eventually sold his remaining 30%. Said he wanted to retire, spend time with family. Really, he couldn't stand watching a black woman run circles around his decades of mediocre management. I bought 15% of his shares, brought in 2 other investors for the rest. Now I owned 66%. Unassailable control. Madison disappeared from social media for a while. When she resurfaced, she'd moved to California, had a new boyfriend, was working for some startup. I didn't follow her closely, but Jasmine kept me updated. Apparently, Madison told people I'd ruined her life out of spite, that I was a bitter, vindictive woman who couldn't stand to see my son happy. Let her tell that story. I know the truth. The viral videos from the housewarming party still pop up sometimes. Entitled, Bride Mistakes, Mother-in-Law for Maid. Racist daughter-in-law gets instant karma. Woman hands black mother-in-law a mop. Doesn't know she's her new boss. The comments are always satisfying. Thousands of people sharing their own stories of being underestimated, dismissed, treated as less than. My favorite comment was from a user named BlackGirlMagic247. She really thought being rich meant she couldn't also be racist. The way she learned that day. Chef's kiss. A year after the housewarming party, I got an unexpected call. Madison's number. I almost didn't answer. Dr. Johnson? Her voice was different, smaller. I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from. What do you need, Madison? I need... She paused, and I heard something that might have been a sob. I need to apologize. Really apologize. Not like at the party where I was just trying to save face. What I did was unforgivable. The way I treated you, the way I treated Marcus. I was raised in this bubble where people like me didn't have to face consequences, and you popped that bubble in the most public way possible. I waited. Let the silence stretch. I'm in therapy now, she continued. Dealing with a lot of stuff. My therapist says I need to make amends, not for forgiveness, but for accountability. So I'm calling to say I'm sorry. I'm sorry for the racism, the classism, the cruelty. I'm sorry for treating you as less than when you're clearly more than I'll ever be. And I'm sorry for hurting Marcus. Okay, I said simply. That's it? Just okay? What do you want me to say, Madison? That I forgive you? That we're good now? You spent months treating me like I was invisible, culminating in public humiliation. You want absolution? Go to church. I'm not in the business of making you feel better about your choices. I know. I wanted you to know I'm working on being better. Good. You have a lot of work to do. I hung up. Marcus asked me about it later, when I mentioned the call. Do you think people can change? I think people can learn to be better if they want to, I said carefully. Whether Madison becomes a better person or not isn't my concern. My concern is you, baby. Are you better? Yeah, Mom, I really am. And he was. I could see it in how he carried himself, the way he talked about his work, his life. He'd started dating again, casually. Women who challenged him intellectually, who had their own careers and ambitions. Women who saw him, not his potential, as an accessory to their lifestyle. "I'm seeing someone," he told me one evening. We were at my house, cooking dinner together like we used to when he was in college. "Her name's Simone. She's a civil rights attorney. Tell me about her." His eyes lit up the same way they had when he first told me about Madison, but different too. More grounded, more real. "She's brilliant, Mom, and she doesn't take any of my nonsense. Last week I was complaining about work, and she just looked at me and said, 'So what are you going to do about it?' Not coddling, not fixing it for me, just pushing me to handle my own problems. I like her already. When do I meet her? Actually, I invited her to Sunday dinner next week. If that's okay?" "Of course it's okay. This is your home too, baby." Simone was everything Madison wasn't. Natural hair in a glorious afro, sharp intelligence in her eyes, a handshake that was firm and confident. She asked me about my work, listened to my answers, challenged some of my points respectfully. Within an hour, I could see why Marcus was smitten. "Your son tells me you executed one of the most elegant corporate takeovers he's ever seen," Simone said over dessert. "I wouldn't call it a takeover. I invested in a struggling company and implemented necessary reforms. Reforms that happened to dismantle your former daughter-in-law's entire lifestyle?" Simone grinned. "I watched those videos. The look on her face when she realized who you were? Priceless. You don't think I was too harsh?" "Too harsh?" Simone set down her fork. "Dr. Johnson, that woman handed you a mop and tried to humiliate you in front of nearly 100 people. You responded by being a successful businesswoman who refused to tolerate nepotism and waste. That's not harsh. That's professional." I decided I really liked Simone. 2 years after the housewarming party, Sterling Industries went public. We'd grown so much, become so profitable, that staying private didn't make sense anymore. The IPO was wildly successful. My controlling interest, now converted to publicly traded shares, was worth substantially more than I'd invested. I was wealthy before. Now, I was genuinely rich. Richard showed up at the IPO celebration. He looked older, diminished somehow. "Congratulations, Dr. Johnson. You've built something remarkable." "We've built something remarkable," I corrected. "You started this company. Your father before you. I just made it sustainable." He nodded, looked like he wanted to say more, but didn't. Just shook my hand and left. I never saw him again after that night, but I did get a letter from him 6 months later. Handwritten, surprisingly. "Dr. Johnson," it read. "I've spent the past 2 years thinking about how I treated you, how I raised my daughter, the values I prioritized. Money over character, appearances over substance. I saw you as a solution to my business problems, never as a person, never as Marcus's mother, never as someone deserving of basic respect. My daughter learned those values from me, and watching the consequences of that teaching has been humbling. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that some of us do learn, eventually, even if the lessons come too late. You were right about everything. The company, the nepotism, all of it. I hope someday I can be half the leader you've proven to be." I kept that letter. Not out of vindication, but as a reminder that change, real change, is possible when people are willing to face their own failures. Marcus and Simone got engaged 18 months after they started dating. The engagement party was at my house, casual and warm, filled with people who actually cared about my son. Friends from college, colleagues from work, Simone's enormous extended family who welcomed Marcus like he'd always been one of them. "Mom," Marcus pulled me aside during the party, "I want to thank you." "For what, baby?" "For showing me what it looks like to stand up for yourself. For not backing down when Madison tried to make you small. For teaching me that love should never require you to diminish yourself." His eyes were wet. "I'm sorry I forgot those lessons for a while. You remembered them when it mattered most. That's what counts." The wedding was everything the first one wasn't. Joyful, inclusive, authentic. I sat in the front row, Jasmine beside me, and watched my son marry a woman who loved him for exactly who he was. Simone's vows made everyone cry. "I promise to challenge you, support you, and never let you settle for less than you deserve. I promise to see you, Marcus, really see you, every day for the rest of our lives. During the reception, I saw Marcus across the room, laughing with Simone's father, completely at ease. This was what happiness looked like. Not the strained, performative joy of his first wedding, but genuine contentment. My phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. Congratulations to Marcus. He deserves happiness. Madison. After 2 years of silence, she was reaching out. I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "He does. Thank you." 3 years after the housewarming party, I gave a keynote speech at a Women in Business conference. The topic was turning obstacles into opportunities. I told a sanitized version of the story. How I'd been underestimated, how I'd transformed that underestimation into a business success, how I'd refused to let other people's limitations define my ceiling. After the speech, a young black woman approached me. She couldn't have been more than 25, eyes bright with ambition. "Dr. Johnson, I just wanted to say thank you. I've been the only black woman in my company for 3 years, and I've dealt with so much casual racism, so many microaggressions. Hearing your story reminded me that I don't have to tolerate disrespect just because I want to be professional." "You absolutely don't," I told her. "Being professional doesn't mean being a doormat. It means holding yourself and others to high standards. Don't ever let anyone make you feel like expecting respect is unprofessional." She hugged me, tears in her eyes, and I thought about that housewarming party, about the mop in my hands, the laughter in my ears, the choice I'd made in that moment to stay calm and strategic rather than emotional and reactive. If I'd made a scene that night, if I'd yelled or cried or left in anger, Madison would have won. She could have painted me as the angry black woman, the dramatic mother-in-law, the problem. Instead, I took the mop, stayed composed, and let my actions speak louder than any outburst could have. That's the power they don't want you to know you have. Composure in the face of disrespect. Strategy over emotion. Long-term thinking over short-term satisfaction. Sterling Industries continued to grow. We expanded internationally, opened offices in London and Tokyo, became a leader in our industry. I brought Marcus onto the board of directors once he had enough experience. Watched him contribute meaningfully, make smart decisions, grow into a leader in his own right. Simone made partner at her law firm. She and Marcus bought a house, not a mansion, but a beautiful home in a diverse neighborhood with good schools. They were talking about starting a family. "If we have a daughter," Marcus said one Sunday dinner, "we want to name her Diane." My eyes filled with tears. "Baby, you don't have to. We want to," Simone said firmly. "We want our children to know the strength of their grandmother. We want them to grow up with your story, your example." 4 years after the housewarming party, I got an email from Madison. Subject line, amends. "Dr. Johnson, I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I've respected your boundaries by staying silent, but my therapist thinks I need to try one more time to truly make amends. Not for forgiveness, but for closure. Would you be willing to meet for coffee? I understand if the answer is no." I showed the email to Jasmine. "What do you think?" "I think you don't owe her anything, Mom. But I also think you're curious about who she's become. Otherwise, you would have deleted this without asking my opinion. My daughter knew me too well." I agreed to meet Madison at a coffee shop, neutral territory. She arrived early, I noticed through the window. Sat in the corner, nervous energy evident in how she kept checking her phone, smoothing her hair. She looked different, older, but also somehow lighter, less polished, more real. Her hair was shorter, minimal makeup, jeans and a sweater instead of designer everything. "Dr. Johnson," she stood when I approached. "Thank you for coming." "Madison." I sat across from her, ordered tea when the server came by. We sat in awkward silence for a moment. Then Madison took a deep breath. "I've been in therapy for 3 years now, working through a lot of issues around how I was raised, the values I absorbed, the person I became. And I keep coming back to that night at the housewarming party." "Go on." "I was cruel, deliberately, consciously cruel. I saw you as a threat to my marriage, to my lifestyle, to this image I'd built of myself as someone who'd married up. And when you showed up at my party, in my house, I wanted to put you in what I thought was your place." She looked down at her hands. The mop wasn't a mistake or a joke. It was intentional humiliation. I know. I wanted you to know that I know. That I'm not hiding behind excuses anymore. What I did was racist. It was classist. It was cruel. And I've spent 3 years trying to understand why I thought that was acceptable. Have you figured it out? I was raised to believe that my worth came from external things. Money, status, appearance, who I married. And deep down, I was terrified that I had nothing else. No real skills, no real value, nothing of substance. So I performed superiority to hide the emptiness. She looked up at me. You threatened that performance. You were everything I wasn't. Educated, accomplished, self-made, and you were Marcus's mother, which meant you had a claim on him that I couldn't compete with. So I tried to diminish you. I sipped my tea, let her words settle. I don't expect you to forgive me, Madison continued. I don't even think you should. What I did was unforgivable, but I wanted you to know that it changed me. Losing Marcus, losing my job, losing that whole life, it forced me to figure out who I actually am underneath all the performance. And I'm better now. Not perfect, probably never will be perfect, but better. What do you do now? I asked. I work for a nonprofit, educational access for underprivileged kids. I make a fraction of what I used to spend on shoes, and I've never been happier. She smiled, and it looked genuine. Turns out having a purpose is more satisfying than having a luxury car. Good for you, Madison. I mean that sincerely. Can I ask you something? You can ask. Do you regret it? The way everything went down? I thought about that question carefully. I regret that my son got hurt. I regret that he had to go through a divorce, had to rebuild his life. But do I regret standing up for myself? Do I regret making sound business decisions? Do I regret refusing to tolerate nepotism and waste? No, I don't regret those things at all. Madison nodded. That's fair. More than fair. She stood, gathered her things. Thank you for meeting with me, Dr. Johnson. I won't bother you again. I just needed you to know that I see it now. All of it. Who you are, who I was, what I did, I see it. Madison, I called as she turned to leave. She looked back. Keep doing the work. Keep growing. That's the best amends you can make. Not to me, but to yourself. She nodded, tears in her eyes, and left. I sat in that coffee shop for a while after she was gone, thinking about the past 4 years. About how a single moment of cruelty had set off a chain of events that changed multiple lives. How my decision to stay calm, to be strategic, to use my power wisely rather than destructively, had created ripples I couldn't have anticipated. If you're a woman who's ever had to choose between reacting and responding, between emotion and strategy, hit that like button right now. Marcus asked me about the meeting later. How was it? Interesting. I think she's genuinely trying to change. Do you believe her? I believe she's different than she was. Whether that change is permanent, who knows? But it's not my job to monitor her growth. That's her work to do. Very zen, Mom. Very practical, baby. I've got a company to run and a grandchild on the way. I don't have time to hold grudges against people who no longer have power over my life. Because that was the truth of it. Madison had tried to make me feel powerless, tried to reduce me to nothing in front of 85 people. And in response, I'd shown her what real power looked like. Not cruelty, not revenge for revenge's sake, but competence, strategic thinking, the ability to see the long game and play it better than she'd ever imagine. The baby came 8 months later. A girl, perfect and tiny, with Marcus's eyes and Simone's gorgeous curls. They named her Diane Simone Johnson. And when I held her for the first time, I thought about legacy, about what we pass down to the next generation. Your grandmother, I whispered to tiny Diane, is going to teach you to be strong and kind, strategic and compassionate, to know your worth and never let anyone make you forget it. Marcus stood beside me, his hand on my shoulder. She's got the best teacher. 5 years after the housewarming party, I was featured in Fortune magazine. The Quiet Revolutionary, How Dr. Diane Johnson Transformed Sterling Industries. The article detailed the company's growth, my leadership style, the culture I'd built based on merit and innovation rather than pedigree and connections. There was one paragraph about the viral videos from the housewarming party. Dr. Johnson declines to discuss the incident in detail, saying only, Sometimes people show you exactly who they are. The question is whether you'll believe them and act accordingly. I believed, and I acted. The article went viral in its own right. Think pieces about racism in corporate America, about Black women's leadership, about the difference between revenge and accountability. I didn't read most of them. I was too busy living my life, running my company, spending time with my growing family. Little Diane took her first steps in my office. I was on a conference call, and Simone had brought her by for a quick visit. Mid-sentence, discussing quarterly projections, I watched my granddaughter let go of the couch and toddle 3 perfect steps toward me. I muted the call, dropped to my knees, caught her in my arms. "That's my girl. Look at you, baby." The executives on the call could wait. This moment couldn't. That's what Madison never understood. That real power isn't about making others feel small. It's about building something meaningful. It's about creating space for the people you love to grow. It's about using your position to lift up rather than push down. Sterling Industries now has a scholarship program for first-generation college students interested in business. We partner with HBCUs, provide internships, mentorship, career pathways. Every year, I meet with the scholarship recipients and tell them a version of my story. Someone will underestimate you, I always say. Probably multiple someones. They'll look at your skin color, your gender, your background, and they'll make assumptions. You have 2 choices. You can internalize their limitations, or you can prove them spectacularly wrong. I recommend the second option. The students always laugh, but I can see it in their eyes. That recognition, that understanding that they're not alone in this struggle. 6 years after the housewarming party, Richard Sterling died. Heart attack, sudden and unexpected. I went to the funeral, paid my respects. Madison was there, composed and dignified. We exchanged nods across the church, nothing more. That felt right. At the reception after, one of Richard's old friends approached me. "You know, Richard talked about you a lot in his final years. Said you were the best thing that ever happened to his company. Said he wished he'd been smart enough to see your value from the beginning instead of just stumbling into it." "He was a complicated man," I said diplomatically. "He was a fool in many ways," the friend said bluntly. "But he learned. That counts for something." It did count for something. Not everything, but something. 7 years after the housewarming party, Marcus made partner at his firm. The celebration was huge, all his colleagues and friends gathering to honor his achievement. He gave a speech, thanking Simone, his team, his mentors. Then he looked at me. "But most of all, I want to thank my mother. Mom, you taught me that setbacks are just setups for comebacks. You showed me what resilience looks like, what integrity means, what it takes to build something real. Everything I am, everything I've achieved, it's because you showed me how." I cried. Didn't even try to hide it. Let the tears fall freely while the room applauded. Later, in a quiet moment, Marcus hugged me tight. "I'm sorry it took me so long to see what you were trying to show me. You saw it when you needed to see it, baby. That's what matters." Do you ever think about that night, the housewarming? Sometimes, but not with anger anymore. More like curiosity, like watching a movie of someone else's life. "Madison sent me a message last week," he said quietly. "Said she's getting married again. To a teacher, someone she met through the nonprofit. How do you feel about that?" "Happy for her, I think. We weren't right for each other. I see that now. She needed to become someone else, and I needed to become myself. Neither of those things could happen while we were together. That's very mature of you. I learned from the best. My favorite moment from this whole story was watching my son transform from someone seeking validation through others into someone who validated himself. What was your favorite moment? Comment below and let me know what you would have done in my position. And if you're a woman who's ever had to stand in your power while others tried to diminish you, if you've ever had to choose dignity over drama, if you've ever been underestimated and used it as fuel rather than defeat, the next story I have for you is going to hit different. It's about a woman who stayed calm on the outside while burning with purpose on the inside, and what happened when she finally let that fire show. You won't regret clicking the video on your screen right now. Trust me, this one's special. 8 years after the housewarming party, I'm standing in my corner office at Sterling Industries headquarters, looking out over the city. The company's value has quadrupled since I took over. We've created hundreds of jobs, launched innovative products, become a model for ethical corporate leadership. My phone buzzes. A photo from Simone. Little Diane, now 3 years old, wearing a tiny business suit, sitting at Marcus's desk with a toy phone. The caption, Future CEO. I smile, save the photo, and get back to work. There's a board meeting in an hour, a new acquisition to discuss, a future to build. The mop from that housewarming party probably ended up in a donation bin somewhere, forgotten and discarded. But the moment it represented, the choice I made when it was handed to me, that moment shaped everything that came after. They tried to make me small. I chose to stay strategic. They tried to humiliate me. I chose to elevate myself. They tried to put me in my place. I chose to redefine what my place could be. And in the end, that made all the difference.